getting crazy, baby, chill. Don't medicate, just meditate. You waking up now, well, baby, you hella late. Educate, look at what's going on, let it resonate, accelerate. Find your inner hunger like you never ate. Agenda is to push the hate, separate and segregate. Don't celebrate quite yet, the storm is coming, Q, for heaven's sake. Violence that they demonstrate, instigate and penetrate. The values of our country and our God is what they desecrate. My fighters ain't no featherweight, pulling out the seams of the fabric that they fabricate. They feed us lies, manipulate, intimidate through fear and force, forcing us to sit and wait till we come together, congregate, and then we liberate. Praying that you give me strength to find some love amongst the hate, marching on these streets of blood.
Welcome back to the Tim and Steve Show. I am Tim Beard with special guest Donna Magoon, Superintendent of the Newport School District. Much better looking Steve Morris.
Well, thank you for that.
How are you?
I appreciate that. Steve might not.
That's all right. Steve's not here, and he probably won't watch the show, so we can pick on him all day long today.
Oh,
so.
Great.
So I wanted to have you come in, first of all, because when I do the show by myself, I don't think anyone really wants to listen to just me talk. It's usually me and Steve, and it's a lot harder. And I thought you would be a perfect person to bring in because the school district is a conversation in the community, obviously, a lot with sports or any other thing that's happening, behavior, or was it FBLA that just like one chapter of the most improved chapter of the year.
Yes.
So we have so many great things that are happening. And so I guess first thing would be like just like to introduce yourself if people don't know you, and then like you're the superintendent. What does a superintendent do in Newport?
Sure. Well, before we start, congratulations for your first win yesterday.
Thank you.
You must have been excited.
I was, and I thought I wasn't keeping track as well, and I thought that they had tied it, and we were going to just end in a tie, which I would have still been very happy with. And then my daughter was doing the book for me, and she's like, "No, like Taylor scored it out, so like we won." And I was like, "Oh my God, we won!" So it was great. The girls worked hard, and I appreciate it. It was.
They looked happy. They looked happy in the picture. So
they did. They're super happy, and they're well behaved. Sometimes I have issues in practice. I'm like, "Come on, girls!" But they impressed me. They very much impressed me yesterday because I was very worried at first, and they stepped up. So very, very proud.
That's good. They usually do. That's what's really good
Yes.
about our students. If they need to, when it comes to it, they'll step up.
It's like the time to step up, and they step up. Yeah. I was so impressed. Yeah.
So what do I do? So I do a lot of different things. One of the main things that I do is oversee the entire district, right? The safety of our students, the safety of our staff. That's one of the major things. But I also make sure that the staff and the students have everything they need, from curriculums to books to programming to those types of things. I also interview and hire staff, and make sure that our buildings are up to code. So there's a lot that gets involved. That's involved with doing it. I attend to a lot of meetings to make sure that we are following all the new House bills or guidelines that are coming out from the state. We manage a lot of money grant-wise, so I have to make sure that we're following the protocols for our grants, constantly looking for other ways to support our district through other types of grants. So that's just some of the stuff that I do. This week's been a real busy week because it's teacher contract week, and so we've been pulling together the contracts, and normally something that would take you a little bit of time took us a lot longer because we need to make sure that what is on the contracts are exactly what the teachers are going to be teaching. So we needed to go through every teacher and what their credentials were and make sure that they're in the correct position. And so we had to make some adjustments. So for instance, an elementary school teacher, there's two different types of degrees that you can have in an elementary school. You can have your early childhood certification, which is you can teach from kindergarten to third grade. Or you can have your elementary certification, which in some cases it's either K to 6 or K to 8. And so we needed to make sure that it was put on their contract correctly. So that way the building principals are aware if you have someone that can only teach K to 3, that you are putting them with only for kindergarten, first, second, or third grade. So you can't go above that. So just checking those things and double checking the pay and making sure that they're getting what they need to. And
that's one of those things. And obviously, for me, I've worked with you for more than 6 months now, like on the school board. And so obviously, I know more about things than other people do, or especially about your job, because I deal with you all the time. I talk to you all the time. I don't deal with you. Yeah. It's a pleasure to deal with you. I talk to you all the time. But like one of the things I appreciate the most from you is that you don't, transparency. Transparency is a big thing. And my arguments as a parent from the last administration was just, there wasn't transparency or acknowledgement of anything that was a negative, right? And no matter what, you're going to have positives, you're going to have negatives. And behavior is a big issue that we have in our schools. There's no secret about that. And the fact that you acknowledge it and want to make it better, I appreciate that more than you know, because previously it didn't exist. It's like, well, then it's not real. It's not really happening. And it's like, no, I know it's happening. My kids go to school here. So, you know, in like our last meeting, we talked about behavior, and because we want to make it better, right? For these kids to learn, they can't have teachers constantly having to babysit. And so, tell me something. Like, one of the biggest things that you come out with was like the room where at toll so no more out of school suspension, where it's like, okay, go and play video games. Like, that's not a punishment, that's a reward. And you're like, no, I have an idea for that. And like, so let's talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So one of the things that we're doing, and we just got full approval for that room.
Awesome.
And so we can, they limited us at first to how many students that we can have. And so now we're just making sure that we have all the pieces in place. But we have had students have to go into that room, and it's not going to be an option, right? So what will happen is we have in-school suspension. So a student that is misbehaving in the building or doing a tier 1 or sometimes a tier 2, depending on it, can have what's called an in-school suspension. So they're in the building, they're in the high school and the middle school doing their time, right, so to speak. So they're in the high school and getting all their work and everything done there. Then we have out-of-school suspension. So the student would typically be out for anywhere from 1 to 10 days out of school. And so what would normally happen is the student would then be sent home. And with no fault of any parents, parents have to work. And so the student would be left home alone and possibly not doing what they should be doing, right? We all know kids. I was a kid once, and I didn't do everything. My mother wasn't around. I would do different things, things I wasn't supposed to be doing, right? And so so playing video games, or, in some cases, we've seen kids walking on the streets, right, when they're supposed to be in school. So, we have to come up with a way to curve that, right? And the only way that behavior is going to change is if we change behavior. And so one of the things that I brought to the board and they approved is having a room down at Toll. So we actually have a couple of rooms down there. One that we use for our out-of-district students. So we're looking at saving the district money by bringing back some of our students from Spalding or from Crotchet Mountain and working with staff here. So we're not outsourcing our students. They're in our community. They're doing jobs in our community. And because when school's over, they're coming back to this community. So we still want them to be part of this community. So the second part is one of the other rooms that we have is the out-of-school suspension room. So it's still, we don't consider it I guess we say out-of-school suspension at Toll is what we call it. And so what will happen is the student will, instead of staying home, they go to the Toll building, and there we have staff that work with them. They get their work from the day. So whatever type of work that they would normally have done that day will be sent to them, and they would do it in that space. There is an absolutely no cell phone policy, so kids are not allowed to have cell phones out. If they have them in their bag, because maybe after school they need to call their parent, then that's one thing, but they do not have them out at all. And so that's one of the things that we looked at putting in place there. But they go there and they do their work. But another component of that is they have a person that will talk with them. So if, say, for instance, if we had a student that had a vape, then our SAP counselor would come down and have conversations with them. They would also have to do modulars, like a learning process on what is vaping and what does it do to your body and those types of things. And then there's people there to have conversations with them about that. So we look at how can we change the behavior, right? And so we do an educational piece with it. And so if it's bullying, then we talk about bullying and what happens when students are bullied and why would somebody be bullying someone. Because sometimes it could be there's something wrong in that child's life, right? So we have those conversations with them because we offer support for both people, for the child that's being bullied and the person that's doing the bullying, because there's usually more to it. And so we're looking to expand that as we start to move on. So we're really looking at the behaviors overall at both the elementary school, middle school, I should say all three. the elementary school, middle, and high. I always say both schools because we only have 2 buildings.
Right, right.
But all of it, right? We've made some adjustments, but when I started in July, everything was already set in place. And so what we had to do is kind of, I don't want to say sit back, because we did make some adjustments and some changes, like the toll building has already started this year, but look and say, okay, what changes do we need to take place? How severe do they need to be? And what can we do? Because the last thing we want to do is take any of our students and place them outside of our district, right? But we have to look at how can we support kids that have trauma without traumatizing our kids that don't have trauma, right? Because we don't want them to come to school and have trauma, right? And we want to be able to support our families that need that support. And so we're looking at a whole bunch of different ways to be able to allow that for our students and our staff and our parents. So we're looking next year at potentially breaking down our middle school into having classrooms that will help with some of our students that have those types of behaviors and needs. And then our middle school, we're in the process of hiring an assistant principal and looking to put things in place there, that there's more adults walking around the hallways at times, so that way the kids that are in the hall to go to the bathroom or whatever are able to go without fear, right? Because I am hearing that, I won't ever deny that there's no behaviors in either of the buildings, because I know for a fact there is both. And it breaks my heart when I read emails about kids afraid to go to class, or they're afraid to go to the bathroom because of other students in our building. And we can't tolerate that. It's not okay. We're required by law to offer a free public education, and that's what we're doing. And we need to look at, okay, how can we work with these other students that are taking that away from some of our students? And so that's what we're looking at.
Right, and that's the thing, it's been like previous, let's say the last year, burst balling is brought up on the school board many times, like our numbers, this 211 and 211 thing. And, prior to you being here, it was brought up, and how are we going to make it better? And now I think we all see what will make it better is the fact that the behavior is so out of control that no wonder the scores are what they are, because the teachers can't teach. It's like they're babysitting, and that's not their job. And I, as a parent, would get mad because the teacher would do something that would be totally like a parent's job. And I used to get mad, but now I'm like, now that I have the perspective of it, I'm like, oh, I understand, because there are some parents that aren't parenting, and so unfortunately the teacher's job has evolved even more. So for the parents that are still very much involved and really want to make sure that everything's done, the way it's supposed to be, whatever, just know that the reason that these teachers sometimes will step on your toes is because with some kids, they just don't have that. And the best environment they get is when they go to school.
Correct. And so, one of the things that I always talk about with staff is the fact that we have very dedicated staff here in this district, right? And so there are other districts just, not too far from us that pay a lot more money than what our staff are receiving here, and with that becomes a lot less responsibility, right? So they go to another district and they're teachers, right? So they just go to work every day and they teach. Not to say that other schools do not have issues, because all schools have their own issues, right? It's, no matter where you go, you're going to find issues. But they just may not be as intense as they are here. But here, our teachers come to work every day, and other staff as well, and they're mothers, fathers, psychiatrists, that one person, and teachers. And they're trying to do all of that, and they're getting paid less, when it should be the opposite, right? The teachers in the districts that don't have to deal with all that should be getting paid less, and our teachers should be getting paid more because they're doing more work. But they're doing it, and they're coming in every day. One of the things that we really need is parent support, right? Parent support. Because believe it or not, and I shared this with you earlier, I get more complaints about students being disciplined than I do about students being nervous in school or worried in school.
That's so crazy.
And cell phone is one of the big ones, right? So
yeah, we talk so much about that, and I know we're going to have a lot of future conversations about it. And the nice thing with elementary school is there's no cell phones. If they have it, it's a way, like if they see it, it's done, and it doesn't seem to be an issue there. I'm sure occasionally it turns into one, but like at the middle school, it's a huge issue. And then, I'm not sure about the high school. I'm sure I know it's an issue at high school because, like I mentioned, like my son got caught cheating on tests. Well, why? Because he had his phone out. Yeah. And so it's definitely a conversation to have down the road. But the problem is, like, okay, I get it. I totally understand, like, the parent and the cell phone, and I get it because you can get to them immediately. But at the same time, you can do what we always did and call the office if you need to speak to your kid, too. So it's not like you can't talk to your child.
Right. And part of the process, right, is I also want to say we have a lot of really good supportive parents as well.
Absolutely.
Right? And so I'm very thankful for that because we wouldn't be able to survive, right, if we didn't have parents actually stepping up to the plate and saying, yeah, no, my kid should not be doing that in school. They're there to learn. And so we have a lot of really supportive parents. But as far as cell phones go, one of the things that I always say is, and I'm looking to, and I said to you earlier, hosting a forum in May and another one in June and then one throughout the summer regarding cell phones because we need to make a change in our middle school. And I know the board is really wanting to see this change. And so getting some input from families and students is very important as we start to move down this road. And so, parents can be watching out for that type of thing. But one of the things that I always say to parents, if there is something that is that urgent that you need to get a hold of your child during the day, then more than likely they should have an adult there to support them, right? So if it's just to say, take the bus home instead of me picking you up, that's a call to the office, right?
Right.
But if it's your grandmother is in the hospital, yes, but that should also come through the office because that's a huge impact on the child, right? And they should have support there, whether it be our school counselor or a staff member or someone should be there to support that child. And so, I always say that if you have to get a hold of your child during the day, then there really should be another adult with them.
Right. If something like that,
Yeah.
or mom and dad should be the one to be like, hey, Grim's in the hospital or whatever. Like,
Right.
Yeah, and it's tough too because a lot of this is we're fighting a society thing, so it's way bigger than just the school. It's social media is a huge issue. Cell phones, which have the social media, like a lot of the behaviors we're seeing from kids is because of cell phones. Like, so I'm coaching JV softball this year, and Jeff Miller, who's the athletic director, is like, originally I was going to do middle school because my daughter's in middle school, and he's like, hey, how would you like to do JV? We'll move up the 8th graders because I think I have enough to do this. And I was like, absolutely, because they'll just be that much more mature, and so it's more coaching and less babysitting, if you want to call it, with the younger kids, which I understand. I get it. Trust me. We're all young. I coach T-ball, and there's nothing harder than that. Like, that is the hardest thing. But and I even see it with some of the varsity girls, but, like, the attention span of these girls. So I have 9 girls out on the field, okay? And, usually I get about 20 minutes to a half hour, and then if we're kind of doing the same thing, I start to lose their attention. Well, it's because of things like TikTok. They're 30-second videos. They're minutes. So their brain's constantly used to stimulation that's changing,
Over
right?
and over again, yes.
And so it's hard to fight that because that is
The new norm?
the new norm, if you want to call it. And I find out myself, like I'll watch TV and I'm on my phone because TV's boring. And I'm going to be 40 in June, so I can only imagine as teenagers how tough that is. So it's a hard thing to fight too. And the only thing I can say as far as that is, like, parents, you need to be aware of what your kids are doing on their cell phones because there's a lot of bad things out there. But cell phones is just not a place in the classroom at all. You're there to learn.
Right. And so, a few years back, they would say, cell phones are good because you can do activities with students and they can use their cell phones, right? But then the problem began with some students don't have them. So what are you doing for those students? Our schools are one-to-one. So there's no reason that students would need their cell phone for educational use, right? And so sometimes one of the things we get, the kids will say, well, I can use my calculator, but we have calculators in school. So you can use a calculator that we have in school. So, and it becomes a distraction, right? Because you may be looking at your calculator, but then a message comes in, and I know I have done that myself, where I've been at the grocery store using my calculator, and then a message comes in, and next thing I know, I'm talking to somebody, text messaging back and forth, in the middle of the grocery store, right? So it can be a distraction. And so that's what we have to really look at is it more of a distraction that they're in the classroom, right? So that's the thing that we're looking at. We do have a few things that we're looking at bringing forward. Tomorrow night is or Thursday, whatever day this airs. So Thursday night is the big event that we're having, the Blast Away Bullying. So this is one of our kickoff days for bullying. And so we've put together with a couple of other organizations a big event that we're going to have over 400 and I think it was like 58 or something people in our community, parents and students attend this event. And it's Scarlett Lewis and Recycle Percussion. So they're actually coming together. And they've been wanting to come together to have a joint message for a long time. And this is going to be the first time they actually come together. So it's a big event for us because, number one, we get both people to come. And number two, it's their first time they're ever presenting together. So and they plan to kick it off that way. So we're like a kickoff for them to doing this presentation together. But it's all about, talking about compassion and caring about other people and being aware, right? Being aware of things that are going on. If you see something, say something. Don't stand there and watch, right? That's how people get hurt. And so it's just making people more aware of that. And then if you're really having an issue, go to someone versus take it out on someone, right? And so that's a lot of what their message is going to be about. So we're actually really excited about them coming. And then we did a bullying forum, I think it was a couple months ago. And so now we've pulled all these documents together. We've met with our teams. So in May, we're looking to have another forum again, so that way we can bring the forms out, have some feedback on the forms. And, we've generated our groups and made sure that our schools are being consistent with how the procedures are going. But what I will say to you is that, especially in our lower levels, one of the things that we're seeing is the bullying is taking place cell phone use. So they kind of interlink together, right? That we said, we're going to talk about bullying and then we're going to talk about cell phones. So now we're kind of bringing them both together and saying that we're seeing a lot of our bullying taking place over cell phones. And we hear a lot of parents say, well, that is something that's happening outside of school. Why is school involved in this? Because the way the law reads is that you're correct. If it's something that is occurring outside of school, then the school district has no control over it. However, once it comes into the school, then it becomes the school's responsibility. So what tends to happen is, you see arguments, or you see kids crying, or you see people upset, and it has to do with messages that they've received, whether it be over the weekend or the night before or over vacation. And so we're seeing a lot of that happening. And kids can be really cruel. They can be really cruel. And so some of the things they say are really hurtful, right? And they may not realize it because it's one of those things, right? You always say, well, it doesn't hurt me, so why should it hurt them? But to some people, there may be something going on in that person's life that you're not aware of, and that just really is a turning point for them, right? We have a lot of kids, and we had a parent talk about it, just saying to kids, why don't you kill yourself? Right. And as a parent myself, that went through my daughter was majorly bullied. And so I take bullying very serious. When my daughter was in school, she was a freshman that actually was nominated homecoming queen, which has always been a junior or senior thing. And so it became hell for her because girls started really harassing her and bullying her. And it got to a point where I would drop her off at the office, and a teacher would pick her up and bring her to class. And then she would go, teacher would pick her up at class and bring her to the next class. And then it just continued. And I finally, I know I shouldn't say this, but I looked at her journal, right? Because I was worried because I noticed that she started to withdraw and things started happening. And there was things in there about committing suicide, right? And so when I hear kids saying to other kids, why don't you kill yourself? Now, I think to myself, the state that my daughter was in at that point in her life, people saying that to her could have been the turning point. It could have made her do something like that. And I was thankful that I was able to intervene and we were able to get support and help. And this was before bullying. This is when bullying was just starting to come up. My daughter's, 35 right now, and so, but she will talk about the impact on her even now to this day on how she was in school. But so I don't want to ever see any parent go through the pain that I went through for all those years and still go through, because I see how it impacts her even today as a grown woman and some of the choices and things that she makes. And I wouldn't want a student to go through that feeling. And and that's why I say it really breaks my heart when I see kids saying, I'm afraid to go to school. I'm afraid to go to the bathroom. That really bothers me a lot. It really bothers me a lot.
Yeah, this is definitely something, like, this is a conversation we need to have in front of a lot of parents. Like, we need to have a assembly forum, something, and be like, even if it's just part of the cell phone thing, like, here we go. This is why we want to do this. It's not to be mean. It's not to be this. It's not to be that. Like, there's just a lot of stuff happening that shouldn't be happening. And it's crazy. I do see that. Like, kids nowadays are so much more cruel than I ever remember them being in the past. Like, it's crazy. And then, but like, my own daughter came home from school, maybe it was last year. There was a phase at one point in the last couple of years. Like, I heard her saying that, like, kill yourself. And I'm like, where the hell did you hear that? And, like, do you not realize what you're saying, right? It's not like, I don't know, some other insult to someone. Like, that's a severe thing. And then I hear so many kids now saying that, and I'm like, do you realize the consequences of those actions? Do you realize, like, what that could mean to the wrong person at the wrong time? Like, why would you say something like that? And it's, I don't know if it's something that they see on social media, which catches on or something, and then it spreads, or if it's just a couple kids spread it. Because I've noticed too, like, the people you surround yourself with, your language tends to copy theirs, right? Like, I never used to use the word hun ever, but my wife uses it all the time. So then I use it a lot now. So if you surround yourself, depending who you surround yourself with, like, you pick things up. So I don't know if it's just kids pick things up and then but I was just, like, shocked that I'm like, why would you even say that?
And it's so much easier to type it than to say it, right? So you can say all kinds of mean things and you not really feel the impact, because it's just easier to type it than it is to say it. Because when you verbally hear yourself say it, some of the kids are like, oh my gosh, you know. But I've thought about doing forums and bringing in people that have been bullied, and parents of students who have been bullied and had their child had committed suicide because of it, just so that way they know it's out there, right? And I think a lot of times there's been cases where you've seen on, TV where kids that are being bullied and actually commit suicide, and the person that told them to do it can be tried.
Yeah.
Right. And so I don't think kids understand all of this. And I think really having those conversations with parents, is very important to say, and some parents don't even realize that it's stuff their kids are doing, right? So having those conversations about bullying, but having those conversations about cell phones and having an understanding of your cell phone, your child's cell phone. I had a parent meeting with me one day, and we were talking about her Snapchat, her daughter's Snapchat. And she said, well, I'm her friend, so I see everything she posts. And I said, well, did you ever look at the bottom and see the little icon to see if she has more than one Snapchat? And the mother said, I didn't realize they could do that.
Yeah, kids are way smarter than parents think.
Like, and there's actually, if you look at your child's phone, and you may look at it and say, okay, these are just the regular icons, but there's certain icons that are made to look a certain way, so that way parents don't know what they actually mean, right? It's not until you look into it. So we actually have a social media person coming to speak to families and to students about this, and they offer forums. He's going to be offering forums that get pushed out, so either parents can attend his forums online or they videotape them and you can view them later. But it talks about different things, about things as easy as like Minecraft, or there's other games that the younger kids are playing, that sometimes, like there's certain video games that have really cute names. And so, parents like, oh, okay, I'll download that for you. But then they don't realize that it's actually a monster that's going around killing people. Right? And so parents don't realize that because they put these really cute names to them. So it's really going to help open the eyes of a lot of people and say, oh my gosh, I didn't realize this. So we're looking at doing this as well. And we've already have them slated to come in to meet with parents and talk with parents. So we're going to kind of overlap our bullying and cell phone, even though we really wanted to just focus, because those are two big issues that we're seeing in our school right now, is on top of discipline, right? So we have bullying and, cell phones and discipline. So we have some three major issues that we're really working on right now to try to curb. But they're going to overstep each other because of the fact that they're so intertwined that we have to deal with them all at the same time in order to start to move forward.
It's changed so much because, like, when I grew up and when I was in school, like, we didn't have social media like that, right? It was like the start of cell phones and stuff, but like you didn't have that. So if you were to say something to someone or spread a rumor, like, you risk getting punched in the face, right? It was a reality. If you said something, there's a chance someone's going to do that to you. But now, unfortunately, if you look at how it's happened, is now there's like no punishment or there's no consequence for anything you say. And it's easy to say anything on a phone because the person's not in front of you.
Yeah, and you can do anonymous.
Yeah.
So you can text something and it be anonymous and people don't know who it is. So you could spread rumors about somebody and no one ever knows who spread the rumors, right? And so it's a lot more. So years ago, see, I didn't even have cell phones when I was in school, so I'm a lot older than you. But you go to school, and if there's an incident at school, when you go home, you're safe, right? There's nothing. You watch TV or you hang out with your friends. Now it's 24/7. That kids are exposed to this type of stuff. Not to mention, right, and I know we always say it all falls back to COVID, right, but if you think about it, for almost 2 years, kids didn't have school. So they really had no socialization. So we really see the lack of kids able to communicate and socialize in group settings is big. And we're looking at 2-year gaps. So kids that are in, 8th grade are, in most cases, acting like 6th graders. Right. And so we're seeing a lot of this as well. So we're trying to work through all of this and support kids and support families and try to get our district, where it needs to be. But, the ultimate goal is to have our scores higher than what they are. Right. That's our ultimate goal. But we're going to get nowhere until we fix these problems first. Right. It's almost like, if you're hungry, you're going to be thinking about, what am I going to have for lunch versus, what's the answer to this math problem, right? So making sure these things, if you're scared, you're not going to be thinking about your classwork. You're going to be thinking about when I have to walk in the hallway the next time, right? So these are behaviors that we need to change and we need to stop.
Yeah, it's crazy because, going back to like a board meeting before, and then, we talked about social economic impacts on kids, and I was I'm against that in one way, in the sense that I feel like it's an excuse, right? Because you're poor, you can't learn. And I'm like, well, I didn't grow up rich or even middle class. I would have grown up in a poorer family. And so I had a hard time with that. But what I think was kind of missing was, to me, I feel like that was an excuse put on it, not okay, this is an issue. Now, how do we get around that? And so we were talking about the snack program that Richard's had. And so me and Steve did that 5K last year, and we're like, we're just gonna do it to raise money for that snack program, and we raised like $450, and then we matched it, so like $900, and we gave it to that snack program, because the reality is we didn't realize, even know, and people need to know, like, there are a lot of kids that literally come to school hungry that don't get food at home, and like that breaks my heart. And and you're right, how can a kid learn if they're like, I haven't eaten since yesterday at school, or whatever?
Believe it or not, this week, the week before school vacation, is the hardest teaching week. And it's not because vacation, well, I guess I could say yes, it is because vacation, but it's not what you think. It's not the excitement of vacation, right? We have a lot of kids that don't want vacation. because school is their only security, right? School is their only source of food, so they can have breakfast and lunch, and they have that adult there with them, right? So we have a lot of kids that misbehave because they don't want to be home next week, and they don't know how to talk about that. And so we see a lot of misbehavior happening before any types of vacation. And of course, as we get closer to summer, it ramps up even more, right? And so we really have to work on that. But I always talk about it, and I don't know if I really shared with you my whole story, right? So I grew up in a family of 9, so I'm the baby of 9 with a single mom. And my parents got divorced very young. And when I grew up in the projects in Manchester, and so it was a lot different life for me. I was 12 years old picking weeds so I could get my own school clothes at the local farm. So we were very, very poor. And so going through school, that we had nothing, so I got free lunch. And I remember having to bring chocolate milk powder in a bag because we got free milk, but it had to be white milk. And all the other kids were drinking chocolate milk, and I wanted chocolate milk. So I would have to bring in like the no-name brand from the store of powdered chocolate milk. And so I can remember all of these things and growing up having behavior issues because of the fact that I didn't have that stability at home. My mom had to work, and we had nobody home when I got home. And so I could run the streets and do whatever I want and didn't get in trouble from my mom. I got in trouble a lot at school. So that's why I always say, that's one of the reasons why I made a good principal, because I've already done what all these kids are
Right.
thinking about doing. And I remember I used to say that to my kids, whatever you're thinking about doing, I've already done it. So don't try to lie about it, And so it gave me a different outlook on education. And when I was in high school, I actually, I was told that, I was going to amount to nothing, and that I was actually in elementary school and middle school. I was told I was going to amount to nothing, and I was going to end up pregnant, and I was going to be just like my mom, poor on welfare. And my freshman year, I actually became pregnant. And I ended up losing the baby when I was 8 months pregnant. But before I lost the baby, I had to meet with the school principal and the superintendent, because back then, pregnant girls were not allowed in school during the day. And so my building principal actually said to me, and the superintendent was there, said, "We don't allow sluts like you in our building." And so it was very traumatic. And so I had to go to night school. I couldn't go to school during the day because they didn't allow me to, so I had to take my classes at night. And so I understand a lot of what people are going through. And I ended up getting married when I was 17 years old. I had to get permission from my mother to get married. But that was a way for me out, right? And so, but I fell into the same thing. Yeah. Not a very nice husband that I married. And I ended up getting divorced young and I had my daughter at 19. And so I was on welfare, and I had to take a look at my life and say, oh my gosh, everybody was right. And it wasn't until I had a few positive people in my life saying, your life's better than this. Even though you came from nothing, doesn't mean you end up with nothing. And so that always impacted me, because I did have a few teachers along the way that really tried to motivate me and push me. And I think back and I'm like, if it wasn't for them, and if it wasn't for the other people that were in my life, I wouldn't be where I am today, right? And so I went back to school. And my husband always, he says to me, he goes, you'd be the ideal poster child for welfare, because you used welfare for what it was intended, right? So I went to school, and they helped pay for some of my schooling. I had to submit mileage slips, so they helped pay for some of my mileage, because I couldn't work because I was in school full time. They paid for my child care, but when I wasn't in school, my child was not in child care. My child was home with me,
Right.
And so I did what was supposed to. I did what was required, and they said, this was a so many year program, and so I did my time, and then I did, I continued on, and it was once I started into the school systems, and I've always worked except for 1 year when I worked in Milford. So I started off in Franklin because my whole thing was getting into a place where I really wanted to make an impact on people that were like me, right? Because I've been there, done that. I know exactly what you're going through. And so I started in Franklin. And I worked in the classroom for a while, and I could make an impact on those kids, right, and those families. And then I decided I needed more. So then I, was an assistant principal and a principal and just made up the steps because the higher up you go, the more of an impact, right? And so now, as a superintendent, I look at the district as a whole, right? So how can I help the families that need the support as well as the ones that don't, right? And so, and how can we all work together for the same goal, right? Because we're all in it for the same thing. We're all in it for the children. Right. And so what can we all do to make it better? Instead of pointing the fingers and saying it's because of this, it's because of this, it's because of this, right? I'm more about solutions than problems, right? So, okay, we know we have a problem. We know that we have a lot of people in our district that don't have a lot of money. We know that. I mean, that's a given. We know we have a lot of discipline issues in our building. We know that. That's a given. But what are our solutions, right? Instead of saying, well, it's a problem, it's a problem, it's a problem. Okay, we know it's a problem. What are we doing? And that's the step that we're at right now. It's a problem. What are we going to do? Instead of saying, well, it's that person's fault, what are we going to now do? Instead of pointing the finger, let's all get together and do something about it. And that's where we're at.
No, I mean, it's a powerful story because it shows kids, it shows people that just because you're here right now or you came from this, it doesn't mean anything. You may have to fight harder, right? Because if it's not given to you, you're going to have to fight harder for it. But then when you accomplish it, it's going to feel better too because you actually earned it. Because a lot of people, they have a silver spoon and it's just, and they don't feel the same way of accomplishment as you do because when you earn your way and you fight and you become what you want to become, like that means something because it wasn't just easy,
And it's so right because, as parents, right, you always say, I always want better for my kids than I had, right? And so now I look at it sometimes and I say, is that really a good thing, right? Because now my kids are great, they're hard workers and they do all that, but I think the value of $1 means more to me than it does to them. And so that's why when we sit at meetings and people say, well, as you run the district, you have a lot of money, that a little bit should mean nothing to you, but the value of $1 means so much more to me because I had to bust my butt at a very young age to get things, and that it means a lot more to me, and especially when it's not my money. Right. When I'm spending somebody else's money, it means even more to me because I have to answer to people, and I've always said I will answer any question that anyone asks me. One thing I'm not good at, I'm not good at being a politician. Never said I was. Even when I was interviewing, I said, if that's what you're expecting, that's not me because I can't do that. You ask me a question, I'm going to give you an answer.
Yeah, I find that too. Like people, I don't know if people come to me and be like, well, you're more political or whatever. And I'm like, I'm not political. I speak up for what I see as right and wrong. Mm-hmm. And that's why I love Newport or local, like, politics, if you want to call it, because it's not a left or right thing. I hate that whole thing. For me, it's just a right or wrong thing, or what I think should happen versus what's not happening. Because I hate that whole, it's politics. Politics is such a slimy word almost to me. It's, you know what I'm saying? It's like, no, it's not politics. It's just, for me, I see it as, I think this is right and I think that is wrong, and how can we, change it? And it's tough because I had lunch with Alex Lee the other day, and I was asking him, how it was going as chief, and I know it's a tough thing because it is. If you're the chief of the police department, it's more political than it is actually doing your job, and there's no way around it. It just kind of is that way, and he's like, I kind of miss detective because you probably feel like you have more involvement there too with that. Where for you, it's like you have the whole oversight of it all, so you have that. Control the most you can of trying to make the biggest impact possible. And the same with the school board. Like, we're just trying to make the biggest impact possible that we can to make things better for kids. And it's not easy. It is not easy at all. I often say, I'm like, man, I should just did the selectman thing because it's so much easier. Because it's
These are human lives.
Yes,
right?
and
it
you
makes
know,
it more difficult.
and you can look at the whole town like, yeah, but you have more people that you're responsible for. Yeah, but I'm more responsible for like, the roads and the buildings and whatever. But in the school, it's like, yeah, I'm responsible to try to
These are
educate
human lives.
Yes, and at a critical point in their life where, right or wrong decisions can change their lives drastically to being successful or not being successful or struggling for a very long time to be successful. Like, it's pretty powerful stuff. And, there's tough days. And I mean, I even asked Alex, I'm like, how do you do this? Because I hear some of the stories. And you go to some of the houses and same with yourself, like the stories you hear. And it can be heartbreaking. And especially when your hands are tied and you don't have the control to fix it. That's probably my hardest thing as a business person that's used to, oh, there's an issue, just fix it. It's snap your fingers and you fixed it. It's that simple. But when it comes to government, school, whatever, it doesn't work that way. It takes time.
It does, and you have to have buy-in, right? So in order for me to say, oh, I got to make all these changes, I can't, it's not like, Donna Magoon's going to come in and has a magic wand and can make everything better, because that's not the reality. The reality is the change happens from the community. The change happens from the parents. The change happens from the staff. The change happens from the students. The change happens from the school board, right? I can help guide, and I can help support, and I can help with all of that, and be the cheerleader. But I can't make change myself, right? And so I think that's the big piece that everybody needs to realize. It's not just about what is Donna going to do. It's what are we going to do as a whole, right? And so that's what we need to be thinking about, is how as a group can we make these changes, right? If we want to make, our district and our town a better place, how can we make it better, right? And so, and a lot of times, people say, because I hear a lot, I actually don't hear it a lot, so I'm very thankful for that, but I don't live in Newport, right? And they say, well, you don't live in Newport, why do you care, right? And I care about kids. And the kids that are here in Newport may not always be here in Newport, right? And so I'm vested in students, I'm vested in families. That's what I vest in, right? And so how can we make this better together? And so it's not necessarily about where I live, it's about, what I feel.
Yeah, it's so different.
And
like a lot of people have said too, like, oh, I believe like the town manager should live in town. And I can see the pros and cons of that, but also in today's day and age, it would be very difficult to limit yourself to, okay, it has to be someone from Newport because your skills do your job, skills town manager's job, like they're specialized. There's not you can't drive down the street and find 50 people in town that are like, oh, they'd be great at that job. It's not that easy. But when it comes to being the superintendent of the school, like your job is these kids, and you're invested in the kids. So it's not so much the community, and I mean, that's a part of it, but it's the kids, and you could go anywhere to any place and do the same job. It's because the goal is making education better for those children. The community factors into it in the sense that, the better the community involvement, the easier your job is, and the more fun you can make it too. Like, what kind of cool things can we do? And that's what I love about Newport, because there's so many unique things that we do here that other places don't do. And I remember Brent Wilmot, who was previous chief, who is now chief in Claremont, and he's like, I love it because we're like a yes town. Like, someone would be like, hey, can we do this? And he's just like, it's yes. It's always a yes. It's not. And he's like, most places it's like Claremont's bigger, so it's kind of like no, and you have to fight your way to get what you're looking for. Newport's like, nope, we'll do it. How do we do it? How do we make it happen? And that's what's so great about it. And,
absolutely.
I think that's important. And no, I appreciate everything you do, and I like these conversations we have because, like I said, there's things you bring up and that you're so transparent about things that I know me, even just as a parent, for me, it's so different now, and I greatly appreciate it, because before I felt like it was just kind of swept under the rug, like it was existing, but because we didn't want to have a negative, no, you have to talk about negatives to get to exactly.
You can't fix it.
So
right? It's one of those things I always say, you can't fix it if you don't know it's broken, right? And the more people that know it's broken, the more people that can help fix it,
right?
And so I think that's the message, right? It's about everybody getting together, right? Because we all want the same thing,
right?
We want our kids to do well, and we want our community to really thrive. And the only way we're going to do that is if we're together, right? Because the reality is, if someone wants to move into a town, one of the first things they do is they check the schools.
Yeah.
Right. And so if we really want our town to do better, our schools have to do better. And our schools will do better. You know, I have total faith that we have great teaching staff that are able to move our kids forward. We just have to try to eliminate some of these things off our kids' plates.
No, absolutely. And we've, you know, and Steve said it many times too, is like our kids are better than our test scores. And I agree 100%. And to make all that better, it's just, okay, we need to tackle this behavior thing and more focus in the classroom, and we'll get there. And I totally feel 100% like we're on the right path now. And that's a lot of the battle right there, is just being on the right path.
Yes.
And, no, I appreciate you coming in. I know you got a lot going on today, and super excited. Recycle percussion coming, and like that whole thing is a big thing for our community, and hopefully it'll have a huge impact on our kids. And I think we need more and more of these things, and that's probably something as like a board and as a school we should really be working at. Like, I think more of this is important.
Absolutely. I'm so impressed with how many families we actually have coming to this event. And so, and it's been changed. It's been changed from the Opera House to the middle high school. So,
Yes, in the gym.
And so we did let people know that, but just in case, you know, you always have the one person that, oh, I didn't hear.
Yes, yeah. So if you're going tomorrow night, it's at the school now. It's in the gym.
You have to have your tickets with you.
Yep, you have to have your tickets. Most people should already have them. If you don't, for some reason, you can reach out to the school and be like, hey, I haven't got my tickets. I had talked to you before. I'm like, I don't remember if my tickets are at the SAU or at school, so I'll figure that out. But no, I'm excited. I know like some of the kids are excited. We were supposed to practice. I'm like, well, and actually originally Miller's like, hey, can you do a game on Thursday? And I'm like, no, it's like Recycle Percussion's coming, and I'm sure a majority of my girls on my team are going to this because it's a big thing. And it's great. It's free. It's going to be good. So I was like, no, that's not going to work. So I'm looking forward to it. And I know these guys have done a lot of good stuff in the community.
They have.
Evolved New Hampshire and around.
When we first were looking at bringing them, our district was very fortunate. We got a really good-sized grant to help pay for them because they're very expensive.
Yeah.
Recycle percussion is very expensive to bring into a community, and so we were able to secure a very big grant for this. And so we were really excited about it. And so at first the group was talking about selling tickets. And I was like, yeah, no, that's not happening. If our district is putting in this much money, then it's free to our families, because we have families that may not be able to afford tickets.
Yeah.
And I want this to be, you know, a kickoff for our blast off to bullying, right? And so we need to make it available. So it's good. So it was free to all of our families to attend. So we're pretty excited about it.
That's awesome. And probably a lot of those kids that couldn't afford to go are the ones that need the most.
Yes.
So it's important.
And so they'll do, so during the day at the high school, at the middle school, they'll be there. I have a feeling they're going to want to walk around the rooms and get everybody all stirred up. So we're preparing the teachers for that. And then they'll be around the community. And then they'll be that evening and presenting with Scarlett Lewis. And so they'll both be there. And they're going to do a presentation followed by, I think it's like a half an hour or so performance. So the kids and parents that don't get to go see them are actually going to be able to see them in action. So
nice.
I think it's going to be great.
It's awesome. I love it. So, Al, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, you're welcome. Oh, one more thing. It's also should be on NCTV.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So some folks out there that don't have tickets or couldn't make it or whatever,
Yeah.
you'll be able to watch it on NCTV, so that'll be awesome too. So, good deal.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for watching the Tim and Steve Show, and I'll talk to you next time.
Streets of blood till I see the golden gates. Troubadour and troubled souls, one of God's servants. Blades out, cut the grass till we see the serpents.
One day I hope you see the truth. This puppet show stays on